Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host, Dusty O'Connell, host with the Moser, as per usual. And joining me this week is Vikings blogger extraordinaire. You can find his work at coldomaha.com, which I understand is going through like a rebranding of sorts.
Yeah, it's so I guess it's still Cold Omaha, but it's underneath the banner of Zone Coverage. So I think I was not at the meetings because I'm lazy, but I was at it. I'm tagged onto all the meeting emails, and so it seems like Cold Omaha is going to be a subsidiary to Zone Coverage. Zone Coverage is going to be sort of the parent company, I guess, and then Cold Omaha is going to be sort of the Minnesota regional sports coverage for it. So coldomaha.com right now redirects to zonecoverage.com. I don't really know how they're going to handle it, going into the future, but if the way that they seem to want to go, goes, then I imagine we'll have to move from a WordPress architecture to something else, and then that's good news because it means we're rolling in money. And yeah, no, it's great. We rebranded to Zone Coverage, but it's still also Cold Omaha. I don't know.
Well, for the time being, Arif still writes in podcasts for Cold Omaha, which can be found at zonecoverage.com, as well as 1500ESPN.com, and newly the, apologies for the ridiculous title, the Wide Left podcast with Norse Code guest Ben Natan.
Yeah. Well, okay. So aside from like the very obvious connotations with the Vikings, it's honestly a really good name. I was kind of bullied into it. I didn't want it. Ben actually suggested it immediately, and I told him to like F off. And we went through, a bunch of names, and some of them I really liked, some of them he really liked, but we didn't really agree on the ones that we ended up happening to like. The podcast, if you can't tell, is a political podcast that Ben and I are doing, just to keep, sort of, because I want to talk about all the stuff that's going on. I don't know if anyone wants to listen. I think that's actually kind of separate. If we get I said I was going to be happy if we got 100 downloads in our first podcast. We ended up getting 300, so I'm actually really happy. But it's really more for Ben and me to have an outlet without me like clogging up this podcast or clogging up, all the other like sports channels that I have with political stuff, so that people can kind of opt in to my political commentary as opposed to find ways to try and opt out. It's as more and more stuff is happening, that seems a little bit more immediately relevant to the way that people are kind of operating in like their just regular lives, the more and more I kind of want to talk about politics, which, as a lot of people know, is my original love. So we're starting the Wide Left podcast because Ben and I are ardent leftists. We're like left of the left part of the Democratic Party. And so if you could tell from like the random stuff that we say during this podcast. And so we wanted to come up with a couple of names that, made sense. And so like Wide Left, I thought makes a lot of sense because it like, harkens back to the fact that we're originally football people or have a football background. A couple of the names I really liked: Leftocracy. I liked Social Justice Wizards or Social Justice Barbarians because I thought that was funny. Someone suggested a really good title called So Much for Tolerant Left. I think that's hilarious. We ended up making that the title of the first episode. But yeah, so a lot of people talked about how much they liked the Wide Left name. And so I ended up getting, pushed into that despite being like sort of a source of trauma for Vikings fans. So Vikings fans, I'm sorry. People who don't want to talk about politics, I'm sort of sorry, but, I found a way to, preserve like the sports center nature of my feed. So only a little sorry. Right-wing guys and gals, sort of sorry. But yeah.
So if you have never thought to yourself, Arif, stick to sports, then wideleftpodcast.com is the place for you.
So yeah, and you can find us at Wide Left Podcast. That's the Twitter handle, and wideleftpodcast.com, where we currently have one episode up. We're on Google Play, we're on Stitcher, we're currently getting reviewed by iTunes, but we should be up there soon. The RSS feed, just like it is for, when we post this podcast, Norse Code Podcast, onto the Daily Norseman, the RSS feed is in the show notes. It's one of the first things you'll see. So if you've got your own, podcast reader, you can find it, through the RSS feeder there. It should be available on search engines now because of it, but it won't be in the iTunes search engine for half a second. So wait on that.
You will soon find Wide Left wherever fine podcasts are aggregated, but that, of course, does not imply that you are off the hook for listening to Norse Code, nor that you are off the hook for perhaps making a contribution to the show to help us pay for the various costs associated with operating the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. You can join the illustrious group of recurring monthly contributors by going to patreon.com/NorseCode and throwing us a few bucks every month. We suggest a contribution at the $3.50 level. I don't know if I think we might have mentioned it in passing, but we did get a $3.50 Patreon contribution a few weeks ago with the explicit goal to help us find the Loch Ness Monster, not to disprove his existence. So, or to keep him away, rather. So the Loch Ness Monster hunt continues.
Reserving that $3.50 a month for that purpose. I mean, it's earmarked. We have to.
Exactly. Please contribute your dollars to the cause as well, and earmark them however you choose. If you would like to make a one-time contribution, you can do that at paypal.me/NorseCode. We are very proud of the fact that we don't have to do MeUndies or Casper Mattress or, God forbid, Audible commercials anymore, because we are generally able to meet our financial needs through the generosity of our listeners. And we like it that way, so help us keep doing that. And open your wallets today. Skip the latte this month. Help us either find or keep away the Loch Ness Monster by turns. So after last week, when we dove deep into, I guess, the value of some of the athletic measures that we can expect to see at the Combine, we figured we would turn our attention to the approaching free agency period. The official tampering period begins on Saturday, I think, March 4th. Is that right? Or is it Monday, March 7th?
I believe it's Saturday, March 4th, but I was like, I need to look up free agency stuff so I don't sound stupid during this podcast. And I actually didn't look up the dates for free agencies. So I'm 0 for 1 already, about 1 minute into the actual content portion of the podcast. That's great. But no, I think it's Saturday.
That's okay. Gina Thomas, at Gina Thomas on Twitter, writer for Falcoholic, and apparently the SB Nation site writ large has us covered, according to her kind of catch-all SB Nation draft rumor post, free agency rumor post. Free agency officially begins at 4 p.m. Eastern on March 9th, with the legal tampering period beginning on March 7th.
All right, fantastic. So, yeah, because free agency is creeping up this close to the Combine, we wanted to do our free agency preview right now, so that after the Combine is done, we can actually just do a Combine review and just refer back to the free agency review as a preview, because it would all get muddled together otherwise.
Well, and so there's a few particular Vikings specific instances where the draft rumors are hot. I don't know if it's necessarily implying that he is number one, but all of the ESPN top 100 available free agents blurbs at the bottom of pages have Adrian Peterson's picture on them, given that the Vikings have now officially passed on renewing his ludicrously large contract, making him a free agent.
Yeah, it's not really a surprise. I mean, I was always worried at the back of my head, or actually, at the tip of my thoughts, that the Vikings, there was a small chance that the Vikings would either fall into this contract and end up just agreeing to it because they've got this sentimental attachment to him. And I was also worried that just generally speaking, that attachment would increase his price in a renegotiation, which of course we thought was happening. Spielman ended up saying something along the lines of, a couple of days before they decided to decline the option, Spielman ended up saying that he didn't talk to his agent, which is a pretty clear indicator that, no.
There's nothing
and
to
I
be
think
said.
it also might be a soft indicator that it might not happen too, that he might not return. But yeah, I was always worried that, the way that So remember when they, gave the 5th-year option to Matt Khalil with the intention of never actually paying him the $11.5 million? And then when it came to crunch time, Matt Khalil had all the leverage, and so they just kept that contract on the books. I was worried that was kind of the thing that would happen, and it didn't. So I'm very happy. I'm also, I don't want to say I'm like not sad to see Adrian go. I'm happy because it's the right decision. But you don't want to like stomp on the fact that he has been one of the franchise's greatest players. Like, we've been talking a lot about Adrian Peterson on the podcast, on my other podcast, the Andy Luckery Football Machine, on Twitter, in various articles, basically kind of making fun of his productive ability and talking about how he doesn't have much to contribute to the team, which I think is true. That's why I wanted them to cut ties with him, but I don't want to make it seem like I don't appreciate that like he has been a friggin' phenomenal running back.
Well, okay, but like having been the best running back in the NFL, and not even in the last 3 years, but just like over the last 10, is not a reason to pay him, an 8-figure contract.
He disagrees. I don't know if you've heard this.
Well, I wish him the best with that.
Yeah, well, so this is something. So I was asked on the radio at the KETE in Albert Lee, if Adrian Peterson is the kind of guy that would be vengeful about that. And I think I wanted to reframe it. I don't think he's like a vengeful guy, but I think that he takes everything personally, and I think you kind of read it the same way, where he takes a lot of like stuff, like freaking everything, like very, very personally. And I think that the way he even said he thought he should be paid $18 million is very personal. I've done so much for them. Like, why wouldn't they pay me $18 million? And it's true that he has done so much, for the Vikings.
And we paid him every year that he did, and some years that he didn't.
A full year that he didn't do anything. But, one game. He had one game that year. But, it's... He's the kind of guy that, like, based off of like everything that we have about his like extremely long record of interaction with the media about the Vikings, he just takes stuff super personally. And so I think that he can turn that into sort of spite related moves. Maybe he goes to Green Bay, maybe he goes to Detroit. It's probably not a spot for him in Chicago, but maybe. What do you think?
Well, on the one hand, I'm like curious, like I'm thinking in the back of my mind what being vengeful would look like. Like, does Adrian Peterson like sign with another team and then like fly back to Minneapolis on game days to like let air out of everybody's tires and like run away cackling like, ha 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 ha. Like what?
I think so. That's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to like reframe it. He's like spiteful, maybe is a better way to put it. Like, I don't know if he's going to pull some Bart Simpson pranks on return trips. But I think he's going to maybe sign with a team with the intention of sticking it to the Vikings, right? Oh, I get to play you twice a year. Screw you guys.
So I guess maybe. I think you're exactly right when you say that he is probably taking this very personally and probably views, not being paid $18 million in a field where the next highest paid player who is a significantly better performer is getting paid less than half of that. But I just don't know if it would rise to the level of signing with Green Bay just to stick a finger in the Vikings' eye. I think a bigger consideration for him, and he has said as much, like during this offseason, that what he really wants is to win a Super Bowl, which it's pretty clear he's never going to do in Minnesota. And so that like opens the door to, well, where is he most likely to end up? And there's Chris Tomasson has a report where Adrian Peterson's dad is quoted as...
Classic Chris.
Yeah, exactly.
Philip Nelson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Nelson Peterson.
Nelson Peterson. Yes.
That's it. I'm thinking of the former Gopher shithead.
Nelson Peterson says that the door is still open for the Vikings, apparently acting as Adrian's agent. But also good landing spots might be Green Bay, like we suggested, or Dallas, which, he's talked about in the past. I I don't know why they would ever pull the trigger on that. Or the Patriots, of all places. I mean, I guess if you want to win a Super Bowl.
Whenever like a dude past his prime gets cut or hits free agency, there's always you could go to the Patriots, because they kept on doing it, like Ocho Cinco and that guy, Titans, Hainsworth, Albert Hainsworth.
Randy Moss.
And sometimes it works, Randy Moss. Sometimes it doesn't, Hainsworth, Ocho Cinco. But they have a reputation for it, so they're always gonna like. And I don't know why. Like, I don't think they need a running back. I mean, the team would certainly benefit from the addition of one, but I don't know why. Like, the Patriots, you're right, are one of the first names that people come up with.
It's not like he's going to say, "I'm going to the Cleveland Browns," said Nelson Peterson. He's going to narrow it down to a team that's a contender if it's not the Vikings. Well, so why Green Bay then? Ooh.
Hello.
Ooh, zing. Zing. Another choice quote. You have to improve the offensive line, Peterson said. What is happening right now is so unfair to Adrian.
Jesus. I assume he means from the perspective of he has to run, but he doesn't get any room. And not like, they didn't want to pay you $18 million.
Yeah, no, that's probably fair. I imagine Sam Bradford also probably has some thoughts on that. would be my guess.
I guess Nelson Peterson doesn't hold to the same like team talk restrictions or nice guy talk restrictions as like Adrian is. So
clearly not. But so like, do you really think that Peterson would sign with the Packers just to spite the Vikings? Because if he wants to be on if he wants to be on a Super Bowl contender team, it's probably not them next year.
You don't think so? People think they're close. People think they're always close.
Well, and they never really are.
For a while. Well, I mean, they won the one back like 6 years ago.
That was a hot minute ago.
They're consistently in the playoffs. That's a thing. I think Peterson has been, and this is, so we like going from like me reading public statements by athletes, which is always dicey because you never know if it's like their true personality. Although with Peterson, I think that it probably is.
Yeah, refer to the maxim.
To me reading, beyond those public statements to just general feelings, I feel like he's always been a little bit jealous of Green Bay. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he thought of the situation in Green Bay as just generally pretty good. Because people always think the situation in Green Bay is generally pretty good. And that's because of Aaron Rodgers, because they think that Aaron Rodgers is generally pretty good, even though he put up an entire half season of not being generally pretty good. I do think that Peterson certainly would be willing to threaten to go to Green Bay out of spite, but I also think that Peterson is the kind of guy that would go to Green Bay in order to, spite the Vikings a little bit, also fulfill his goal of being on a championship contender team. I think that he cares about stuff like weather, but I think he also wouldn't be thinking about it like at the time.
He has larger fish to fry.
Yeah.
But so do you agree with me that number one in his mind is winning a championship, though? Can I at least extract that from you?
Sure. Yeah. No, that's fair.
All right. So,
but which teams he thinks are close to winning a championship, I think, are maybe different from our opinions of what teams are close to winning a championship.
I bet you he likes top tier Patriots and Dallas. And
there's a Roto-World, by the way, the Roto-World report. They always get the reports from actually somebody else, but I saw it from Roto-World. Dallas is just not remotely interested in Adrian, which makes sense.
Yeah, why would they be? Like, what do they need what do they need a more expensive running back for? Like, even if they only pay him like $6 or $7 million a year. So
the rumor that he's going to get $6 million, that's just nuts to me.
But there's Adrian's pride though. Like, will he play for $3 million a year? Like, will he go from will he take like a 75 or 80% pay cut just to play for another team?
I feel like if I'm a GM, that's the only thing. Like, if that's the market, like maybe he just retires instead, which I totally get. But like, that's crazy. Like, the most that anyone is going to get paid next year. Evidently, I thought it was $8 million. It's actually less than that. It's like $7.75 or $7.5 million for LaShawn McCoy. And like, really? Adrian Peterson, I think he would still end up being one of the top 6 or 5 highest paid running backs on a $6 million contract. That's nuts. So like, yeah, I mean, that rumor exists. It doesn't like track with me at all. And that's already a 66% cut or whatever, right? Like that's already a pretty huge cut in terms of pay. But his honest worth to me seems closer to $3 million.
Well, that's probably accurate because realistically, you're looking at him to be part of a platoon, right? He's not going to be in every down
platoon and not the guy there on the most critical down on that platoon, right? Because you're not going to put him there on third down. So yeah, a platoon where he's the goal line running back, where he's a second down back, that kind of thing.
The kind of thing you'd want to pay $3 million a year for. Well, okay, so let's look at the other side of this. If not Adrian, then which talented Pro Bowl caliber running back with a history of nagging knee injury can we possibly scoop up out of free agency to replace him?
I'm glad you had that extremely specific set of criteria because I have 2 names.
Well, I figured we'd want to replace the outgoing running back with as similar a quantity as we could.
Yeah, right. How could you transition your offense otherwise? The first name is Jamal Charles. It's a nagging history of knee injuries. A worse injury history than Adrian Peterson. Also, I guess, more recent, better production. Certainly a much more capable pass-catching running back. And somebody who is more versatile, more available on most downs. Definitely very, very powerful for his size, 205. But probably not, the goal line guy that you want. He's actually been fine on the goal line, so it's not like you'd be like, I don't know, don't do that. But, if the idea is that we want a platoon or a complementary backfield or one where you can get, as much value on the dollar, obviously Charles, his skill set overlaps with what the Vikings want McKinnon to be, and then you still kind of have like a gap there in terms of, if you want to punish a dude, maybe don't punish the 31-year-old with knee injuries. Punish like some UDFA or Matt Asiata or something at the goal line and try to get those yards there. But yeah, Jamal Charles is also available, which I find hilarious.
So who's number 2?
Chris Johnson, who I guess I don't know if he has knee injuries, but did get shot that one time.
that sort of counts.
But yeah, he's, a Pro Bowl player. He's also a 2,000-yard player. He was fast, and now he is capable. Yeah, he's hitting free agency, which I was actually kind of surprised by. I guess he only had a 2-year deal. He's, from what I remember, he was a pretty quality guy. He changed his running style, which is the most amazing thing to me. The end of his year, at the end of his career at Tennessee specifically, he had a lot of issues, getting what the blocking was giving him, because it wasn't giving him much. But he also tried to create out of it. When he couldn't create, he ended up losing way more yards than if he had just stuck to the blocking, which again wasn't very much. He changed that style when he was playing in Arizona. What's interesting is that Arizona actually had both David Johnson and Chris Johnson really change the way that they approached the line of scrimmage from what they did in college for David Johnson and what they did in Tennessee for Chris Johnson, and be just much more willing to just stick it and run up the middle and stuff like that. Chris Johnson ended up being like kind of a bruiser, which is like the last thing you'd expect him to be. So in that sense, I guess he could be a complimentary back. But again, like there's probably better options for a complimentary back. Still, he's available, and he reads his keys maybe better, which is crazy because like 3 years ago I would have said that Adrian Peterson absolutely has better vision than Chris Johnson. And that's still probably true, but Adrian kind of wants to do a little bit much, whereas Chris Johnson has kind of learned that lesson.
So the rumor du jour, according to Christopher Gates at the Daily Norseman, dailynorseman.com, kind hosts of Norse Code, suggests that the Vikings may be interested in Latavius Murray.
Also wears number 28.
Yes.
Yeah, I am not like opposed to Murray. He was relatively disappointing, I think, this year for Oakland fans. A lot of people thought that he was like kind of the next breakout guy, but he was all right. Like that's the thing. Like he wasn't bad, and his career at Oakland, a lot of it was marked with not getting enough opportunity and stuff like that. I think that his overall value was maybe overrated by people, including me, about what he could do once he got sort of a full-time starting role. But yeah, the Vikings might rightly be interested in Latavius Murray. I don't know, like, is the idea that they would trade for him? Because I don't think is he hitting free agency?
Yeah.
Oh my God, he is. No, you're right. That's weird. Sure. For some reason, I thought he had another year on his contract. Yeah, he out of the free agent running backs, he has more going for him. Like in terms of, like, for example, in terms of PFF grade, he's like one of the top 6 there. I wouldn't mind him. He'd be a really cheap running back option. You can defer sort of the idea of drafting a running back until the next year, which I understand that this is like a really stacked, really friggin' great running back class. But I mean, next year is evidently supposed to be really good too, because you've got players like Royce Freeman and Nick Chubb and people I haven't heard of yet that are obviously great. But I think that when people, and I think Latavius Murray would end up getting a cheap deal if he could. So the appeal of someone like Murray is that he could settle in and become a starter for a couple of years on a second contract, which is not really the way my head was going. I was thinking of like a stopgap or a guy who can complement McKinnon. The guy that I want most, who's unlikely to sign, I think, with the Vikings. But the guy I might want most is D'Angelo Williams, for example. He's got a more aggressive running style than Le'Veon Bell, and we kind of saw what that meant. But he's a patient guy, he's a powerful guy, he's multi-capable and versatile, but he can provide a complementary role, or he can just be a starting guy, which is crazy. So yeah, I think that there are some options available in free agency, despite the fact that like a lot of people who are thinking about running back are looking at running backs in the draft. And hey, the fact that this is a really good running back draft might also mean that the prices for a lot of these guys will go down, quite a bit. You could also, in theory, go after LeGarrette Blount. I wouldn't do it. Blount outside of New England, in Pittsburgh and in Tampa Bay has been kind of a disaster. Inside of New England, he's been great, but he's a free agent. You could, throw his name out there if you wanted a guy to be sort of like a goal line guy. He's kind of the quintessential version of it. Plus, I guess he's a kick returner, which is weird, but there you go. I don't know if there's any other rumors. Mike Gillislee, I think, is a starting quality running back. He's a restricted free agent for the Bills, so it's unlikely that he's going to hit the market. But every so often, these RFAs do hit the market. I wouldn't like sign a counter offer if he does get a restricted free agent tender, because I wouldn't give up like a draft pick for him or anything. But I think that he's a pretty quality guy too.
As we segue away from this, I do just
and Eddie Lacy, of course. Sorry,
yeah,
just wanted to throw them. I don't want to say anything about it. I just want to put the name out there.
Eddie Lacy's agent is apparently working very hard to keep him in Green Bay, or rather, Green Bay is working very hard with Lacy's agent to keep him in Green Bay. Heaven knows why, but that's apparently what they're doing. But as we segue away from this, one last thing to mention about Latavius Murray is that he is the 3rd highest PFF grade for pass blocking running back, which might be something that the Vikings could use.
No kidding. Well, there you go. That's done. Sign him.
Especially,
it's obviously like the 3rd responsibility out of all running backs, but that's a huge upgrade.
But dude, for the Vikings, that would be pretty clutch. Another rumor that is circulating surrounding the Vikings, it sounds like Russell Okung, after leaving Denver, was not particularly happy in Seattle, and the Vikings have been taking some interest in, again, replacing an oft-injured tackle with another oft-injured tackle, probably at a higher price, but hopefully with higher performance.
Yeah, I don't really know. I'm not feeling Okung, but he actually hasn't been bad. He just wasn't on my radar. Well, he obviously, because he had to be released first, right? Like it wasn't like a declined option. It wasn't. He had to be like actually released, right?
Yeah, which happened. Yes.
Right. No, I know. But yeah, he wasn't on my radar because he wasn't an upcoming restricted free agent. This tackle class just for the draft is so thin that it makes sense to me that one of the three primary positions that you're trying to fill on the offensive line, and fourth if you want to include sort of a long-term center who would like compete with people like, Nick Easton and so on. If there's 3 or 4 positions you want to fill on the offensive line, there's no way that you can do it all in free agency. And so someone like Okung could be, a short-term fill-in. He's not good anymore, but he's just not bad. And if the Vikings got not bad on their offensive line, like in 2 out of those 3 spots, that would be an enormous upgrade. Because, Boone started playing well in the last half of the year. Berger, hopefully he'll be able to continue his level of play. He's, relatively old, so, who knows how long he'll be able to continue that. But if he can continue for one more year, that's huge. And so getting not bad guys is fine. And so he could be sort of a value grab in free agency. There's been a lot of talk about people like Andrew Whitworth, Kevin Zietler. There's been a little bit of talk about, TJ Lang. Some people are interested in Ricky Wagner. But there's a lot of opportunity, I think, for value here. And I think that, Russell Okung, who, again, there's a rumor about the Vikings being interested. 4 teams, I think. I forget who the other 3 were. Maybe the Jets were one of them, being interested in Russell Okung. I think that's maybe where we're going to find some of these guys. There's a couple of other names, worth throwing out there. Austin Pastor, for example, was, with the Vikings in camp, got cut, ended up going to the Jaguars, I think. No, not the Jaguars, the Panthers. Actually played fairly poorly for them for a while, but had one good year. And then in free agency went to the Browns, where he played pretty well. Maybe, he could play well for the Vikings. He seems like a pretty cheap pickup to compete for a spot, not to fill a spot, but to compete for a spot. And maybe he feels grateful that the Vikings gave him a chance as an undrafted free agent. Maybe he doesn't feel like upset that they cut him or anything like that. So that could be interesting. J.C. Treader from the Packers is evidently an unrestricted free agent. I assume they're going to re-sign him, but if they don't, he's definitely... I would immediately start him at center and then move Berger to guard. I think that would be a really great idea. Some people have already mentioned Ronald Leary. I think that he's probably going to get a pretty good deal for a guard, so he may not be a value guy. But Larry Warford for the Lions, he's had kind of an up and down career with them so far, but his rookie year was really good. His second year, not so much, but his most recent year was also, pretty good. So there's a lot of value to be had. There's those stopgap guys like Okung, maybe like Pastor, who you maybe don't want to rely on necessarily for 16 games, but if you have to, you're not like boned or anything like that. And then, there's guys that could potentially sort of take over. So I think that there's been a little bit, maybe too much discussion about guys that the Vikings won't go after. There's a rumor, for example, that the Vikings are not remotely interested in Andrew Whitworth, which, makes sense. He's going to be 36. And he's going to be fairly expensive, and the Bengals evidently do or do not want to sign him based on who you ask. But they definitely have made a decision. But he's going to get a lot of opportunity in free agency, and I think that the Vikings don't want to be part of that market because they want to find ways to have value, either value for a couple years or a long-term solution. Even if it happens to be more expensive, but they don't want to have an expensive stopgap solution, I think is the thing that's, making them maybe a little bit more scared of Andrew Whitworth. So that's obviously interesting. There's a couple of other names to be interested in. John Jerry for the Giants, out of a bad offensive line, I thought that he played all right. The center next to him played even better. So that might, be, a big part of how he did. But, I thought that he played all right. He could be sort of a medium-term solution. And then you kind of want to see what's happening in restricted free agency. Another Bills restricted free agent, Ryan Groy, former Wisconsin center, wasn't a guy that, or former Wisconsin guard, center for the Bills, wasn't a guy I was super interested in, but, has played, well enough that he'd be worth watching out. And then Andrew Norwell for the Panthers. Left guard was okay in a system that requires like a lot out of their offensive linemen. So there's a lot of value to be had in offensive linemen. I think Russell Okung starts that conversation as a stopgap guy. I think that he'll probably be pretty cheap, and he has been not bad for the past couple of years. And then I think that we can expand that conversation to include some of these guys that we haven't been talking a lot, that much about. Maybe Marshall Newhouse from the Giants. I kind of met on him. And there's a couple of guys. Andrew Tiller for the 49ers should be pretty cheap. He's been all right.
Yeah, I like the idea of Larry Warford or maybe TJ Lang, but chances are the Packers lock up Lang at some point in the offseason.
Wouldn't be surprised, but they did just kind of let Josh Sitton just go.
I don't know. Any other I guess Viking specific options that you think would fit into the kind of get as much value as you can? Because I mean, with the exception of like Warford and Lang and a couple of these other guys that you talked about, all the high profile solutions are kind of expensive stopgaps. $6 million plus guys that are good for maybe a couple of seasons. What is there really in terms of long-term solutions? Is that something that we should just kick the can, take a shot in the draft, and then maybe look at the free agency market next year? Is this something where there's a diamond in the rough that we can pick out and potentially have on our line or in our backfield for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, well, I want to see what the Redskins do with Ty Nsekhe, who's a restricted free agent. So again, you might have to end up seeing if he's going to cost more than just a contract. Because if he is, I'm not a huge fan of signing restricted free agents. He's the guy that actually shut down Everson Griffin when Trent Williams was at. So that's definitely interesting. He could end up being a long-term solution. He's pretty young. Ryan Groy, like I mentioned, as restricted free agent, is pretty young. Andrew Norwell, another restricted free agent, is pretty young. All of those guys, unlikely to hit the market, but could end up being long-term solutions. Luke Jokel, not a very good tackle, but last year actually played all right at guard. Decent chance he hits free agency, and he's relatively young. He could end up being a long-term solution. He's another guy that you're like, well, I don't know if I want to start you, but certainly I'll give you every opportunity to start. I mean, you're a former second-round pick. People obviously saw something in you, and I think if we play you at the position that you're best at, you could end up returning dividends for a pretty good price. There's a lot of like younger options that are hitting free agency that are not bad, and that's kind of the threshold, right? Not bad. And I think that you don't want people that are like below the Mike Remmers line for the Panthers, but you do want somebody that's going to provide sort of those long-term solutions. So yeah, Austin Pastor, pretty young, played all right. I mean there's not like a bevy of young guys who are really good hitting free agency, but I think that there's opportunities here, for guys who are, diamonds in the rough. And then of course there's like people who didn't play that much this last year, who are pretty young, who right now I can't even come up with off the top of my head. Don Barclay, I forget how young he is, but he's kind of an interesting option. Brian Schwenke from the Titans, he's an interesting option. Those are young guys that can end up being, diamonds in the rough. I guess Quessenberry for the Texans, if he passes the medicals, would be an interesting option too. Vincent Painter, I was not a fan of him coming out of the draft, but he might be worth like sort of a flyer. He could end up being sort of a diamond in the rough, that sort of thing. So I mean, there's like names in free agency that are well worth being curious about for sure. That are young, that can provide long-term solutions, that won't cost that much because the likelihood of them being a long-term solution is not that high, but is probably worth it. Indeed.
Should we take a moment and contemplate the state of free agency around the division before we advance to the mailbag?
Sure.
So the scuttlebutt is that the Bears are trying to shop Jay Cutler.
Right. Good luck.
Well, exactly. Who in the world?
I mean, Brock Osweiler. That's all you have to. Whenever there's a quarterback, and you're like, no way, you just gotta go Brock Osweiler. 2 hurts.
But Brock's situation was very like that was a lucky moment for him to strike. To be just by default on a Super Bowl winning team and a team that's particularly desperate for a quarterback. It was a weird like momentary bubble in the market, and I don't see there being like a quarterback bubble for Jay Cutler.
You don't think so?
I mean, who's going to fight over him? The Jets and the Texans?
What, the Jets? Yeah. Who better to teach Christian Hackenberg than Jay Cutler?
I don't literally anyone.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking of who Christian Hackenberg might turn into. My bad.
Well, if you want to accelerate the decline, I mean, Jay Cutler will show up with a carton of Virginia Slims.
Hey, man.
On day one.
If you need a low draft pick in order to get some of those hot 2018 quarterbacks, you trade for Jay Cutler. You're essentially trading for like future move up the draft board picks, right? Oh, I'm going to trade, this 3rd round pick so that where I would have gone, 8-8 and gotten, the 16th pick in the draft, now I'm going to go 3-13 and get the 3rd pick in the draft. It's really clever, actually. You just trade a 3rd to move up, like 13 spots in the 1st round. It's genius.
That's the kind of tanking talk that I find is generally better reserved for the NBA.
Yeah, I hate tanking. But I do think that teams are going to be... I do think that teams are going to be interested in Jay Cutler just because the number of starting quality... Because there's no starting quality quarterbacks.
Like Jay Cutler isn't one of those either.
I mean, he is. He's just not a good one. There's got to be a distinction between, like, bad quarterbacks who are starting quality, which I think Jay Cutler is, and quarterbacks that are so bad that it, like, pains you to start them. And I don't think Jay Cutler is that bad. I think there's a class of quarterbacks below that. Like Blaine Gabbert, for example, is just much worse. Just as an example, I don't think the 49ers are going to, like, try and get Jay Cutler when they have, like, the 3rd pick in the draft. But, there's a lot of teams that maybe... Here's a name. Arizona Cardinals. They love to throw it deep.
All right.
It's literally all Jay Cutler likes to do. They are theoretically contenders. So they just need somebody to replace Carson Palmer. They are terrible at finding quarterbacks in the mid to late rounds, which, again, most people are, but they are particularly bad at it. And also, even when they spend, mid to early round picks on quarterbacks, they've been bad. They don't have a lot of opportunity to grab, somebody that they might think is a top signal caller. There's not a ton of quarterbacks that necessarily fit their system, guys with a strong arm that are willing to gun it. Maybe they can try and negotiate their way into Patrick Mahomes, but I think that generally speaking, this quarterback class is not one full of super strong-armed passers that are willing to take deep shots. That's definitely a possibility.
All right. I don't know. We've talked a little bit about in the last few episodes about players that the Packers either do or don't need to lock down in order to secure their questionable future as a perennial playoff contender. Do you think that the Packers roster looks much different than it does now after free agency ends?
Never does.
So they're just going to re-sign everyone and call it good?
Yeah, McCarthy has complained publicly about this, but it never does. They're not even going to do the thing where they go after former great, like they do with Julius Peppers, for example. They're not even going to no, it's Darrelle Revis. No, thank you. I don't think they're even going to do that.
Do you think anyone's going to go for Darrelle Revis?
Somebody's going to give him a shot, but they might cut him before the season starts.
Yikes.
He was bad, man. He was really bad.
Well, and are there still disciplinary things to come down from his arrest? I mean, probably, right?
Probably. I wouldn't be surprised if he had a 4-game suspension coming.
Oh, cool. So you get 12 games of Darrelle Revis.
Yeah. It's great.
Let's see. Melvin Ingram off the board. Womp womp.
Yeah, I guess they franchised him. He's somebody that I guess Colts fans really wanted. He was that's a perfect fit. It'll be great. Now a bunch of Colts fans are disappointed. Not somebody I would have been super interested in, but that's a free agency rumor.
I don't know. Do you have any other players of note or divisional rivals of note that are making?
Well, sure. So, I mean, we did mention that the Packers will probably want to find ways to retain instead of sign new guys. They have a lot of people that they need to try and retain, and they've got a couple of bad contracts. I mean, they got rid of one of them with Sam Shields, but they've got like a couple of bad contracts they have to deal with, like Randall Cobb. Now, I don't think that they're in cap trouble, but it will be difficult. Like if they want, to sign Julius Peppers to another year, that's going to be difficult. TJ Lang, we already mentioned. Nick Perry, who's actually a pretty good pass rusher for them. Probably, maybe less valuable than Clay Matthews because of the sort of, you can move Clay Matthews to be an inside linebacker kind of thing. But, probably more valuable as a pass rusher right now than Clay Matthews has been for the past year. James Starks, probably don't want to re-sign him, but it's something to think about, especially if they're in such dire straits for a running back that they're thinking about re-signing Eddie Lacy. Jared Cook, who was, he had the end-of-year stuff. He wasn't very good, but he had the end-of-year stuff, so that's a thing. They also have desperately needed tight ends for a while. They definitely need to re-sign Dayton Jones. They might be interested, like I said, Don Barclay. They probably really want to re-sign J.C. Treader. Micah Hyde is somebody that they might be interested in. There's a couple of guys they really need to get a handle on, and I think that's going to be kind of an interesting situation to evaluate. They're going to have a lot of money come off the books too, because of these guys. I don't think they're going to re-sign all of them, but it's going to be kind of a tense situation. Chicago, who we just covered, it's worth noting that Alshon Jeffrey is hitting free agency. I don't know if Chicago will re-sign him. They're clearly making it a priority, but
it sounds like
they ran out of franchise tags, right? Like they double franchise tag him.
It sounds like they want to re-sign him, but they don't want to pay him the balance of his contract. So we'll see how that shakes out, I guess.
Yeah. Other than that, they don't have like a ton of, as far as I can tell, a ton of free agent contracts that are like as critical as the Alshon Jeffrey one. That one is obviously going to be like sort of dominating, their available resources. I think every one of their quarterbacks has their contract coming up. Like David Fales is an exclusive rights free agent. Matt Barkley is an unrestricted free agent. Brian Hoyer is an unrestricted free agent. Jay Cutler is on the outs. Like that's going to be kind of interesting how they're going to restack that. They're going to want to probably re-sign Marquess Wilson, even though it's been kind of a disappointment. Oh, right. They also had Connor Shaw, who's an exclusive rights free agent. So there's some stuff that they want to deal with. And then the Lions, who, we briefly mentioned in terms of grabbing some of their guys. Riley Reif, who we didn't mention as a potential, tackle possibility for the Vikings. He could be another diamond in the rough. Right? I mean, he played so poorly in a contract year that he might be, he's young enough to be sort of a medium to long-term solution. If he, gets his shit together. He's had a couple of good years for the Lions. It's just this last year was really bad. So he could hit free agency. Anquan Bolden's going to hit free agency. I don't know if that's a guy that anyone would be particularly excited about signing, but I still think he's going to be part of a team next year, and he's probably going to contribute. I don't know if it's going to be with the Lions. They're probably going to re-sign Tyron Walker, who they really liked when they signed him from, I think, New Orleans. Maybe John Bostic. They do probably want to pursue a linebacker solution in the draft. Let's see. They don't have a lot of like Joique Bell, George Wynn. No, George Wynn's actually already with the Giants. They're probably interested in re-signing Devin Taylor. They don't have as many. They're not as crunched as the Packers are, or even as much as the Bears are in terms of their sort of free agency re-signings.
Indeed. Anything else you want to make note of before we dive into a rather turgid mailbag, since we kind of ignored email questions for a couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think that there's so it's a decent wide receiver class in the draft. It's, I think, pretty deep, and that's with the Vikings maybe potentially investing in. But there's a couple of spots of value in free agency if the Vikings, for some reason, sort of fumble the situation with Cordell Patterson, or he seeks, a commitment elsewhere, or if for some reason, the Adam Thielen thing, which is like pretty much in their hands, it just falls out of their grasp, or whatever. I think there's value. Like, Terrence Williams is hitting free agency. He's not like you want to sign him and start him for 16 games, but I think that he's a valuable piece. Kendall Wright, who I think was undervalued for a long time with the Titans. I think that he could provide something for a team. Robert Woods, disappointing for the Bills, but I think that he still has a spot in terms of his ability to contribute. Taylor Gabriel's hitting free agency. He's going to be, well, I guess he's a restricted free agent. He's going to be difficult, even if he wasn't a restricted free agent, but he would be difficult. But he's somebody, to keep an eye on. Dontrell Inman is a restricted free agent. He's definitely somebody to keep an eye on. You've got, Deshaun Jackson, who's probably not going to be a fit, but is interesting. Steve Smith, who is probably either going to stick with the Ravens or retire. Kenny Britt, who I kind of want to stay away from. But, a bunch of names out there that really either have the ability to be, a solid piece on a team or can be potentially, like diamonds in the rough. Let's see. I'm taking a look at some of these guys that kind of are probably not going to be re-signed. Jeremy Davis for the Chargers, for example, who is an exclusive rights free agent, so it wouldn't be difficult for them to re-sign him, but is a kind of worth taking a look at. Marcus Wheaton for the Steelers has been kind of disappointing. He could be, kind of a diamond in the rough kind of guy. I'm just kind of looking at the receivers just because, you never know. And then linebackers real quick. Paul Warlow, who I don't think is very good, could be a pretty decent backup. Akeem Dent, for example, could be a good replacement for Chad Greenway. Aaron Henderson, turned it around. He's no longer, showing up to practices hungover. He did all right with the Jets as a backup, and then when he filled in, probably not going to return to the Vikings, but, that's an interesting name to sort of keep an eye on. A lot of people were interested in Manti Te'o coming out. He's hitting free agency. He's probably not going to be re-signed by the Chargers. Those are guys that, could eventually compete for a starting linebacker position. The Vikings have so few premium draft picks that, these sorts of deals where they, sign one with, like Zach Brown, for example, sign a contract with one of those guys, might end up being, a way to stock up on sort of that third linebacker spot, which is becoming less valuable in the NFL, but it's still a very important position.
Well, and do you think the dearth of our upper round picks makes that necessary? Do you think we should be taking swings at free agency rather than trying to build through the draft?
Well, I think the Vikings need to see if they can find their next Tom Johnson at just other positions, and I think that they need to be a little bit more. I think that the cheap options they need to invest more money in, and the expensive options they have to invest less money in. But if that makes sense, I think they need to increase their odds of hitting those diamonds in the rough by signing guys who are kind of at the next tier, not guys who are completely overlooked, but guys who there's a lot of signals that they could be potentially pretty good. The Vikings have actually historically ignored those guys. They've either gotten super cheap, like veterans minimum camp body kind of guys, or mid-tier guys, which I would classify in terms of contracts, like potentially Andre Smith, or guys, at the next level above, like Linval Joseph, and they've kind of avoided the star guys. They've avoided both bookends in free agency, but they've also, I think they haven't made the appropriate long shot choices, if that makes sense. And so I think that with the problems of having, the few premium draft picks, I think they need to invest a little bit more into those mid to low tier guys that could eventually blossom and certainly compete for those backup spots. And I think they need to invest more of their cap to that end.
All right. Having said all that, how crucial is it that we re-sign Terrence Newman?
Pretty crucial, I think. I mean,
I know not to blow up your own point for you or anything, but
no, you're right. They yes, they absolutely should.
All right.
Interesting name, Carlos Dansby. Zach Brown, Carlos Dansby, Perry Riley, maybe Spencer Pasinger, Sia Moore, Gerald Hodges. There's some interesting names at linebacker, and that's the kind of maybe they're not going to start, but maybe they are. Who knows? Those are the kind of names. And I think the only kind of shot that they took at a guy like that was Emmanuel Lemur, who I'm not a huge fan of, but I think that is the quality or category of player that I'm talking about, and I want them to invest more in that category of player and less in the category of, oh, you played in the CFL for 3 years? Yeah, come on over, Solomon Elamimian.
But with a name like that, How could you not?
Yeah, and
want him?
also, I guess they were actually kind of right. That was actually a bad name to pick because he's been like a 2-time CFL Defensive Player of the Year ever since the Vikings got him, which is not to say he's an NFL quality player. He's pretty good for the thing that he does, which is the CFL.
So
also great name.
Any CFL fans can tweet Arif directly at ArifHassanNFL.
Oh, another name, Kevin Minter. He was a guy I was interested in for the Vikings coming out of the draft. Cardinals got him, might hit free agency. That's not even like a mid to low tier guy. That's like a purely mid tier guy. I know I'm selling these guys really well.
But it's a good strategy. I mean, given the cap woes the Vikings are facing, I mean, chances are we're going to end up holding the Matt Khalil hot potato for another year.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Won't it be fun?
It'll be something. It'll be expensive.
It'll be fun. It'll be fun.
All right, let's open the email inbox and answer some of these questions that have been languishing here for a while.
Yeah, sorry guys.
It happens. We had a guest last week, and none of the questions that were in the email box were necessarily like time sensitive, so I didn't feel bad about it. But don't worry, Matt in Wisconsin, we haven't forgotten about you. Matt writes in, can you spell out for me the Thielen options? For example, how draft picks get involved for other interested teams.
So Matt wrote this question in actually almost immediately after our show, and I guess I didn't sort of like adequately explain what happens with restricted free agents. So from my understanding, what happens is the Vikings have they've got 4 options. The first option is just to offer him a friggin' contract, I think, in which case they can just offer him what they think is like fair market value, and he can say yes or no, and if he says no, he hits the free market. That's a thing. That seems unlikely. The other set of options, the other 3 options, are what's called tendering him. So they offer him a tender. And so they offer him a sheet that essentially says you have a 1-year contract and you need to sign for this amount. Those 3 options are a first-round tender, a second-round tender, and an original round tender. And what that means is that there's a certain category of pay, I think around $3 million for the first-round tender. Then like $2.5 million is the second-round tender. And then I think around $1 million is the original round tender. And the reason those round names are attached is because if the Vikings offered him, say, a first-round tender, like a 1-year, $3 million contract, if the Vikings offer that, another team can approach Adam Thielen's agent and say, hey, we want to sign your guy to a standard contract. It doesn't have to be like a 1-year whatever. We want to sign your guy to a 3-year, $10 million contract. The Vikings then have the option to offer the exact same contract to Adam Thielen. 3-year, $10 million in this case. And then Adam Thielen is required to sign that contract with the Vikings if they offer that identical contract. If he doesn't and signs with the team that offered that the 3-year, $10 million contract, then that team also owes the Vikings a draft pick. And that draft pick is either a first-round draft pick, a second-round draft pick, or the round the player was originally drafted in, which in this case does not exist because Adam Thielen was undrafted. That's as far as I can tell what restricted free agency means.
All right. Next, do players returning from PED sanctions or suspensions experience declines in performance or increases in injury at an above-average rate given their age, position, etc.?
Anecdotally, it's easier for me to remember players who've returned from that have done worse because it's part of the narrative. It sticks in your mind. Sean Merriman sucked, right? That's easy to remember. And I think I remember 2 other players getting injured after returning from PED suspensions. But I don't know if anyone's ever done a thorough report because it's easy. It's not as easy to remember the guys who played at the same level because it's just not part of the discussion. All those Packers guys got suspected of PED use or whatever, right? And I think one even got suspended. I don't remember. And it seems like they did fine. Those specific guys that were suspected. Nick Perry, I think, was one of them. He's been great.
Will Darrelle Revis ever be good again?
No.
Probably
I still
not.
think that they should have his career earnings in the Hall of Fame, like a plaque with just a number on it.
This guy got paid. Next question from Matt. It seems that all Matt Khalil photos show him looking like someone just stabbed his pet cat, or like he just saw his wife walk out of the Super 8 with Kanye West. Is that media bias, or is that just RKF, resting Khalil face?
I think it's resting Khalil face. He's a pretty morose looking dude, even when he's like pretty happy. And I think he's like pretty happy when he's like managing that pizza place in Mankato or St. Paul. Like even when he's pretty happy, it always feels like, are you sure? Is there something wrong, buddy? You need like a friend? I think that's resting Khalil face. I don't think that he's like constantly sad, although it seems like he is not particularly fulfilled by being, an offensive tackle in the NFL. But I don't think he's like sad.
He's fine.
I agree that he always looks like it, though.
He's fine. Just forget it.
He's fine. Stop worrying about it.
Fine. Don't worry about it. Finally, from Matt in Wisconsin, all we hear about Laquan Treadwell is work ethic, and it's starting to sound like a backhanded compliment. What winning skill is it that work ethic is going to improve? I've heard that the idea is that he can win contested catches, but again, it sounds like a backhanded compliment if it implies that he can't get open. Help us remember why he ranked well as a draft prospect to begin with.
I can understand like why contested catches kind of stings a little bit because it like, oh, now all those catches are contested or whatever. I don't think when people say that, that's a backhanded compliment. I do think that like work ethic is kind of it's a very Minnesotan compliment, right? Where they're like implying like, bless him, he tries hard. But I think that the contested catches thing is not as much that. I don't know if he's ever gonna like progress. I'm currently in the middle of researching a piece about whether Laquan Treadwell has the ability to rebound based off of the history of receivers who have had really, really poor rookie years and were drafted in the first and second round, and therefore basically had every opportunity to get on the field. And I would argue that Treadwell was certainly in that category, even if they wanted to wait with him because of the number of injuries that the Vikings had in their receiver core and the fact that they just hate Charles Johnson. So I think that he also had every opportunity, and so the history of that is not great. I'm going to write that piece up later, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, like there are like some successes. So for example, maybe the best example is Vincent Jackson, who had a evidently fairly bad rookie year as a second round pick, and turned into a very consistent Pro Bowler and like an automatic entrant into the Hall of Very Good.
All right.
He's a first ballot Hall of Very Good, I think, right? Like, clearly he's never going to be in the Hall of Fame. But
a shoe in for the Hall of Decent.
Yeah. Shoe in for the Hall of, well, we thought about it.
The Hall of You Tried. No, not that far. Not that far.
That's Laquan Treadwell.
But did he really try? How are so many of those catches contested?
The catch. It's not the catch, the one catch.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and then I guess the original question asked, like, what was his appeal coming out?
Yeah, like, why did we believe in him?
And I'm not saying this is what headlined the scouting report, because if it did, that'd be dumb. But the first thing people will talk about now is that he's very young. And I think that that's a relevant conversation to have, because I feel like, and I don't, this is part of the research I still have yet to do for the article, I feel like if you struggle when you're very young versus when you struggle when you're relatively old for a rookie, you've got a lot more room to potentially improve. And the other best example of a guy who didn't have a good rookie season that ended up turning into a Pro Bowl quality guy, there's essentially two examples, is Demaryius Thomas. And from my memory, Demaryius Thomas was also very young when he started. And so I think that if you give him sort of that kind of leeway, I think it kind of makes sense to be like, well, it doesn't make sense as much to compare him to like a 22-year-old who has less physical maturity to go through, who has probably less elasticity in terms of like your ability to teach him and stuff like that. That could be important. And then also, there's the injury and whatever. But I think that's kind of the thing that people think about now. But also, like, his contested catch ability was something that people really liked. His route running was something that people really liked. I thought it was overstated. I thought that his route running was not that amazing. I didn't think it was bad, but I think that people tended to overstate it because, like, if a slow guy is good, what does it mean? Well, he's good at contested catches and he's good at route running. So people kind of automatically assume that in there. But I think that his ability to find space and get open, which is a component of route running, was quite good. I think that his ability to, for example, when he was in tight coverage, his ability to manipulate that defensive back coming out of college was solid. You know, he knew how to exploit spaces between, you know, the defensive back and the sideline, or to, you know, create extra room with his arm without looking like a push-off, that sort of stuff. I don't know that he ran his routes well enough to say he's a sharp route runner, and I think that he showed the capability to deceive defensive backs into thinking he was running the wrong route, and then he runs a different route, and that was fine. But I think that really what his strength was finding the holes in zones and in tight situations, creating additional space. And so from that component, he was a pretty solid route runner, but there's a lot of components to it that he struggled with. And purportedly, one of the problems that he has with the Vikings right now is that he's not running routes at the right depth, which is explicitly one of the specific problems that Cordero Patterson had, you know, with the Vikings. So it's kind of like an interesting parallel, even though they're friggin' nothing alike otherwise. So those are the reasons that people liked him. I thought his contested catch ability was also overrated. Remember, I thought he was like the 4th or 5th best receiver in that draft. I had, was it Michael Thomas was my number 1? I think Corey Coleman might have been my number 2. My number 3 might have been Josh Doctson, and I think I also might have had Sterling Shepard above Laquan Treadwell. So when I say the stuff that I liked about him, remember that I also wasn't as high on him as a lot of other people were. So I want to say a lot of people really, really loved his ability to get contested catches. I thought it was okay. It was better than average for sure, but like not enough for me to like rave about it constantly. And then of course the thing that was a part of his highlight reels, like it isn't for other receivers, was his blocking. He's supposed to be this phenomenal blocker, but I think that was overrated too, because when he blocked well, it was like really obvious. Like he was just nasty and mean, and he had a great attitude when it came to blocking, and that showed up on film. That was really obvious, but I think that, you know, he did miss his assignment sometimes. And like, if when you hit your target, you hit well, like that's good, but you need to like hit your target consistently. And so like that is like a problem. Like it annoys me that like he was talked about like this blocking god, because his highlights at blocking were so friggin' phenomenal that they didn't take into account the other components of blocking. So above average blocker, but people thought he was fantastic. And, you know, that's one of the ways to start seeing the field.
All right. Brian James writes in with an interesting email about off-field transgressions. He writes, now that we're into mail yourself weed season, I'm wondering about which offenses could get which players cut if you were to systematize, if you were to make it systematic. Number 1, what is the worst thing your worst player can get away with without getting cut?
Your worst player? I don't think your worst player can get away with anything.
Speeding ticket, maybe?
Yeah, I was thinking like, what if they get a speeding ticket? But I could just see like someone just like cutting a guy. Who's your worst player if you got a speeding? Like, I assume a guy that wasn't going to be cut, obviously, is kind of like the premise of the question. But like, do you remember, what was his name? Caleb King, who was the 4th or 5th running back on the roster for the Vikings at the time. He, and I'm not saying like this was like clearly he should have been cut. Like, it's not like he's on the, is he going to get cut? But like, he got into a fight with someone because someone said he looked like Eddie Murphy. Do you remember that?
I wish I did, now that I hear the story.
It's a random offseason story. I have no idea why it's stuck in my memory. It's just a nobody player, unfortunately. Sorry, Caleb King, from Georgia. One of the random things I remember about him, who I thought had a lot of potential, you know, whatever. He was like the 4th or 5th running back on the roster. Got into a bar fight in Minneapolis because someone said he looked like Eddie Murphy, and the Vikings cut him friggin' the next, like, immediately. And I'm thinking, like, that kind of guy where you're not going to cut him going into camp for, like, no reason, but I don't think it takes a lot of reason. And I'm not saying that's what the threshold is, like fighting a dude over looking like Eddie Murphy. Well, maybe a speeding ticket. Like, what's the next grade up of detrimental to a speeding ticket, because I think that there's probably a pretty big grade between DUI, which would definitely get one of those guys cut.
Oh, yeah.
And a speeding ticket. Like,
What
what's in between?
What about being like 15 minutes late for practice or a team meeting?
Yes, that would get you cut. Coaches are neurotic about that. Jonas Gray got cut for that, and he just rushed for 200 yards for the Patriots. And they were like, bye.
Okay, so you can't be the worst player and be late. So I guess if you were going to be late and the alternative was to drive like 70 miles an hour down residential streets, you would probably want to risk it, because I think we kind of arbitrarily decided that you could potentially survive a speeding ticket, but you would not survive being late.
Right, because like there's I think a 95% probability that if you're one of those bubble players, you're going to get cut if you're late to the meeting. But there's probably not a even 50% probability that you'll be caught, going 90 on a 40. And then if you are caught, like, probably not a super great probability that you'll get cut as a result of it, unless because of it you were late to the meeting, in which case, well, now you have a ticket too.
Yeah, in which case you have now lost twice. And you weren't even a famous enough Viking to get out of the ticket.
Right. There's got to be something in between. This is like, I like this question. This is a good question.
Speeding ticket and late to the meeting.
It's like weird because like I don't think of a marijuana offense as that bad, but because it carries NFL penalties too, it increases the severity for an NFL team.
Okay, so
but if
that's
there wasn't
something...
an NFL penalty, like if the NFL had like got rid of all of its like policies with regards to marijuana, if instead of mailing yourself like a pound of marijuana or whatever, you just got caught smoking it. Like, do you think that in a world where the NFL no longer enforces marijuana restrictions that would result in a cut? I don't.
Well, I think in the NFL as it exists right now, it would not result in a cut in like Seattle or California or Denver. Places
well, I mean,
where...
if it was illegal, where like,
well, no,
that's another addendum. Like if like you got like a citation for it.
Oh yeah, in any place where weed is not already legal, then I think if you're the worst player on a team, you're probably getting cut.
Really, I don't know about that.
I mean, if you're on the Broncos, you're probably fine. If you're on the Raiders, you're probably fine. If you're on the Seahawks, you're probably fine. But if you're on the Patriots or if you're on the Steelers, probably less fine.
Speaking of the Patriots, remember when Chandler Jones went like nuts and like showed up naked to a police station? That was Chandler Jones, right?
Yeah, wasn't he on drugs or like having a panic attack or something?
Yeah, it was a panic attack or bath salts or actual drugs. I don't know.
Bath salts are actual drugs. I mean, anything that makes you do crazy things is an actual drug.
You know what I mean?
It's just not one that anyone should do.
Right.
No,
the good ones.
Yeah, drugs with no redeeming qualities, such as bath salts and heroin. All right. Question number 2 from Brian. What's the worst thing your best player can get away with?
Accomplice to murder, evidently. Just Ray Lewis. I guess technically that's just obstructing justice, right?
Yeah, obstruction of justice, myriad degrees of sexual and domestic violence, probably gun crimes in some states.
I think there's definitely a degree thing when it comes to best player sexual violence, right? Because like Ray Rice was just coming off of a bad year, for example, and then the video got released, which I think is like that's also part of like the domestic violence thing. If the video gets released, now you're Ray Rice and Joe Mixon. If the video doesn't get released, I don't know, like you're Dalvin Cook, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Or Ben Roethlisberger, like, which I mean that's not really the same thing because that occurred in a different environment where the NFL and the public cared less. But still, that's. Yeah, actually, Ben Roethlisberger is like a pretty decent test case, right? Because the allegations were dropped. I believe he settled with one of the two accusers, but I don't know that for sure. But certainly they weren't like brought to trial, and Ben Roethlisberger was clearly a valuable player for them.
Yeah, none of that stuff became public
another
record.
test case. Greg, there we go. Like Greg Hardy, fantastic player. You know, just outside of, I think, probably the peak of his career, and threw, I think, his fiance onto like a futon full of guns, which is just like it's kind of a weird detail, right? Was found guilty at the bench trial, but then appealed, and because of the way that the North Carolina legal system works, eliminated that conviction because they just like a judge does a preliminary thing before like an actual trial before the jury of your peers, and then you can choose to contest. And if you choose to appeal, it's one of the ways that they reduce court clog. Like if you're clearly and obviously innocent, then you're out, or if you're clearly and obviously guilty, there's no point in appealing. And so that resolves the obvious cases in theory. I don't know if it actually works, but it resolves the obvious cases in theory, and then you appeal and you have an actual trial. And the witness never showed up, right? So but he got cut, right? So that counts. Who's the guy from the Junior Gillette, like whipped a belt at a stranger on a beach or something like that? He was not the best player, but he was a good player. He got cut for that. So like some degree of like obvious violence or sexual assault, but evidently like not, like it has to be clear that this happened and that there's a lot of coverage of it. Like
it has to be embarrassing for the player, the league, and the team. Like if it's just embarrassing for the player, like if there's no video, if it's not, if no one else ends up with egg on their face, then if he's the best player or even top 3 players, he probably gets to stay.
Yeah.
I suspect that the best player on any team, regardless of geographic location, could commit a pretty severe financial crime and no one would even notice.
Speaking of, this is so interesting because it's just reminding me of all these stories. This is not really a financial crime. But remember when Sam Hurd, who I believe he's either a receiver for the Bears or a receiver for the Cowboys, and he's accused of running a cocaine smuggling ring that was evidently very large, like huge, in the other city. Like he was either a receiver for the Bears and was running a cocaine smuggling ring in Dallas, was a receiver for the Cowboys and was running a cocaine smuggling ring up in Chicago. Either way, the connection to Dallas 100% makes sense. And 2 is like, were you making more money not doing NFL stuff? That's crazy.
Well, his contract was only $5 million. He definitely was not just accused. 15 years in prison. He's probably still in the tank. Yeah.
Jesus.
Definitely still in the tank.
But yeah, that's not a financial crime. Yeah, I guess I think if you ran a Bernie Madoff style Ponzi scheme, but I think that's where you'd have to be. Like, you'd have to be a really like high crimes financial, like to the point where like the Justice Department gets involved and like it's a thing. But I think that most financial crimes, you'd probably be fine. I mean, because like the victims of financial crimes don't have faces; they're just like. I mean, people even call it victimless crimes, which is maybe not fair, but it's difficult to track down who the victim is.
Exactly. Like if trying to think of a hilarious player name, but it's all right. Let's say Aqib Talib got caught running a check cashing scam.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was like, Aqib Talib is like illegally trading in the derivatives market?
No.
Go Talib.
No, he's one of those guys that sends you a check for like $2,000 that has a different person's name that signed it than it does that like issued it, and it's sent from a third person's like address or whatever. And you're supposed to like keep the extra cash, but send 1,000 of it along to Ol Aqib.
Ol Aqib, the hookup.
Exactly. No, I think he'd probably get away with that.
I think he'd probably. Well, the problem with Talib specifically is that he's got like prior problems, right?
And he's functionally gotten away with all of that. For the quote unquote.
But like they like accumulate, right? Like you can't just be like, well, that proved he could get away with anything. Now he's going to get away with this. Like it accumulates. You go, oh, well, he had that problem and that problem and that. It's like the Pac-Man Jones problem. Like, okay, you like have a gun at a strip club once, You fire a couple of bullets and don't kill anybody. Well, okay, that's a problem. Wait, you did it again? Wait, you just like threatened a bunch of people like randomly in the street? And like now you have a DUI? Like it's cumulative.
And that it does become indicative of a pattern of behavior, which is actually kind of a cool segue into the third part of this question. What is the smallest offense that would get, say, Aaron Rodgers not just cut, but render him entirely unemployable in the league?
The smallest offense. Whoa. Bernie Madoff.
Yeah, probably a Ponzi scheme that ripped off like other people in the league. This is going to sound really, really cynical, but I think that the size of the offense can be quite small if it embarrasses the league. If
you like hurt the wrong people, yeah,
in a big way. If it's like something that's really silly but looks really bad, like if Aaron Rodgers was like running down the streets of Green Bay like naked, like swinging a golf club at mailboxes, even if it turns out that he wasn't on drugs or necessarily doing anything illegal other than knocking over a couple of mailboxes, like if that video went viral on YouTube or something, that would probably be the end of him.
No way. He would probably be cut by the Packers and signed some. There's no way, especially if there's no drugs. Although, like, that has its own set of concerns. Like, it's probably not more concerning, but, like, if you're not on drugs, why are you doing this?
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying, is that it's just bizarre behavior. What if he's wearing the same shirt that Patrick Chung was wearing when he got off the airplane after the Super Bowl? If if he's completely naked except for like a T-shirt with Roger Goodell with the big red clown nose.
That's interesting. Because remember, Riley Cooper remained employable after he shouted a slur at a Kenny Chesney concert. And he's not even good.
Because he's the only person to ever shout a slur at a Kenny Chesney concert.
He's the only NFL player that's been caught doing it.
That's... All right.
And okay, so this is really weird because it's difficult to get barometers because that very same team cut Deshaun Jackson for literally no reason.
Because they didn't like his face.
And then they leaked a fake story about gang ties.
Exactly. They cut him because they didn't like his face.
Yeah, essentially, he was like, well, he doesn't fit in the team culture. And it's like a 1,200-yard, 10-touchdown guy. Like,
Exactly.
10-touchdown a season guy. Like, come on.
He's a contributor.
Yeah,
We just don't like him. We just would rather not see him every day. We're tired of his attitude.
Anyway, he has gang ties, and we're not going to tell the police. Bye.
He's a gangster. I saw it. I totally saw it. I didn't call the cops, but I definitely saw it.
Yeah, I posted to Instagram some gang stuff. You know. Bye. What's the smallest thing? Like, it would be silly and embarrassing to the point of like, you know,
it would be the equivalent of the Howard Dean scream. You know, just some innocuous thing that just got, you know, blown up and repeated on television to the point where the league just simply, or the team.
But I can't imagine, like, let's say you're in the position the Houston Texans thought they were in last year, where you've got all the pieces, you've got a great defense, you've got at least one good receiver and another receiver that you just drafted, and a running back you just signed in free agency, Lamar Miller, that you're very confident in, and all you need is a quarterback. And Aaron Rodgers was just cut from the Green Bay Packers because he was running through the streets naked and knocking down mailboxes with golf clubs. But he didn't even do anything illegal outside of evidently that felony of knocking down mailboxes with the golf clubs, which nobody cares about anyway. Like, you didn't do
boys
drugs,
being boys.
He's not going to be... What's that?
It's just boys being boys.
Yeah, it's just boys being boys. You absolutely sign him. There's no question. In fact, I bet the Packers would just trade him instead. And then start Brett Hundley and then have another 20-year friggin' dynasty.
I don't know. It's so hard to predict because, you know, what is going to go viral? You know, what's going to be the thing that happens on a slow news day?
Even if it goes viral, the Texans are going to be like, yeah, it's probably worth being embarrassed to have this sweet ring I have.
Well, okay, but so what degree of embarrassing is so embarrassing that you don't sign Aaron Rodgers after he gets cut?
Farting into Diplomat's face.
Or like at like a Make-A-Wish Foundation photo op.
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like if
farting in a cancer kid's face, especially pants down. Obviously, these are worse with pants down. Or
like on his face.
Yeah, it's like actually like, oh my god, I have pink eye. Also, I don't have an immune system. What the hell?
Rude.
And then if like he just throws another comment in there, well, you're gonna die anyway. Like if you just did that.
Exactly. It's okay, little kid. You're gonna die soon.
It's like, I can see why your family doesn't want to talk to you, man. That's crazy.
What happened to your hair?
Like,
gross. Yeah, that might do.
Or if like he like visits Japan or like Ireland or whatever as part of like an NFL whatever thing. He meets like Shinzo Abe and then farts in his face.
He meets Prime Minister of Japan. Is it Who or Wei?
Shinzo Abe.
No, that's
Shinzo
Japan.
Abe. Yeah.
I said China.
Oh, China. I don't know. Who?
I think it's Who.
Oh, that's a
President
really weird, like, who's on first. But I think it's Who.
Who? Anyway, if he's like, why are all your people so small? Like, this is a great country, but I can't fit into any of the vehicles or the trains. Why are your beds all so short? Like that might make him that might render him unemployable. Or actually, you know what? In today's America, that might actually resonate.
Let's see. It is Xi Jinping.
Oh, it's she. It's not Who.
Yeah,
it's she.
God.
I'm like.
Anyway,
I'm like 2 presidents ago. Whatever. Yeah. Whatever the smallest offense is, it's something probably like really ridiculous, and you'd probably have to do it to either a foreign dignitary or a
cancer kid.
Yeah, or a cancer kid. Or actually, no. If you were running a foundation and going back to the financial crimes angle, if it turned out that your organization was not actually helping any sick children at all, it was just like sending you to Belize every summer.
I mean, that kind of happened with Peterson.
Yeah.
I mean, he was amidst the others. Like, it kind of got washed out because it was like, by the way, Peterson's been running like a maybe shady, potentially illegal nonprofit. Anyway, we found out like in the middle of the he beat a kid scandal. So like, we'll let this story just die.
It's true. It was maybe overshadowed by another story that I think some of us thought would render him unemployable, but did not.
Yeah, that would have probably been on our list if it hadn't happened and proven us wrong before we predicted it.
Well, refer to question number 2 and all of our answers surrounding various degrees of violence.
Right.
Bonus question. Is there a range of offenses in which it makes football sense to keep your best player, but in which it is shameful for fans to root for him? Whoever could you be talking about? What totally hypothetical situation could you mean, Brian? Short answer, yes, there is.
Moving on.
Logan Reed writes in, would you take on the hassle of winning an island you don't know what to do with in exchange for the healthy return of Teddy Bridgewater? So I got this question, and as melon scratchers go, this one's a honey doodle. So I'm gonna need some background and some context for this.
The reason that this question exists is because, well, it's because I went on a Twitter rant about it, and the reason I went on a Twitter rant about it is because Adidas is offering the player who runs the fastest at the NFL Combine. In Adidas gear, of course, in Ireland worth.
Why does Adidas have an island?
Well, I don't even know if they have it yet.
Why are they just like buying islands to give away? What is going on here?
I don't think they're going to buy it unless somebody sets the. Or I shouldn't have said fastest. My bad. Sets a record. You have to set a record.
It has to be like the fastest. It can't just be it's not just whoever wins the combine. It's like they have to.
Yeah, that was way my bad. Yeah, okay. It has to be a 4.23 or faster. So they haven't bought it yet because they might not need to, probably. So I looked at the rules. If you set the record, it could be on either trial. You cannot win 2 islands by setting the record twice. But if your official time is faster, then Adidas will actually either give you $1 million or an island, but it's not your choice, it's theirs. And they want to give you the island, I guess.
What?
I don't know, man. Anyway, I saw this and I was
all like, very mystifying to me.
If I knew for a fact I was going to run a 4-2-3, I would dial it back. I don't want that island.
Really?
Yeah, are you kidding? That's such a hassle.
You don't want an island?
Yeah, no, I don't.
Did they just throw a dart at a map? Like, where's the island?
Questions. That's a great question. There's 2 questions I want to answer before I get into all of the other myriad problems with owning an island. One, is it in U.S. jurisdiction? If it is, I'm paying property taxes on it. That's in the rules. God damn it. If it's not in U.S. jurisdiction, what jurisdiction is it under? If it's under no jurisdiction, does that mean I don't get protection from like pirates and stuff? Does that mean, I can't expect any infrastructural help if I set up the island for anybody to like literally be on ever?
What if we get Darrell Reeves to do it?
What?
What if we get Darrell Reeves to do it? Run security on the island?
On his island or your island?
Well, I think either way you'd have to name it Reeves Island.
Yes, yes. But yeah, thanks, Dusty. But like, okay. If it's not in U.S. jurisdiction, how difficult is it to get there? If it is in U.S. jurisdiction, it's probably difficult to get there. Like, your family is going to bug you about vacationing on the island and like all year, and then you're like, fine, you can visit my island. And then they're going to be like really upset when there's no toilets.
Is there an airport? Are there civil services?
Probably not. That's my thing. That's why it's a hassle. You need to build roads. You need to build a sewage system. You need to have electricity. Because you could be like, yeah, totally. You can totally visit my island, but you have to fly your own plane and bring a gas generator. Also an airstrip. You're going to have to bring one of those with the plane. Like, that's awful.
Just like roll it out like a carpet underneath you.
And then you have to pay property taxes on it. I'd rather pay the income tax on the $1 million than the property tax on the island.
Well,
that's recurring.
Okay, but if it's an island that's like a principality of America, does America have principalities? I don't think it does.
I don't know.
I don't think it does. If it's a territory of America, you probably get some benefit of civil services, and I certainly would hope that Adidas would not be like trying to foist primitive islands.
But is it a territory where like is its own like it's like American Samoa or Puerto Rico, like it's got its own governance structure, and now you're the governor of the island because you literally own all the land in it, or because if that's the case,
that's what I would want.
Not going to help you out. They're just going to you just have to do it yourself. And if it's under the purview of a state, like I don't know, like let's say it was Nantucket Island or whatever, like.
I once knew a man from there.
Now you have to pay now you have to pay bigger property taxes or whatever, right? Like that's an issue. You don't even get the benefit of schools. You just have to pay this enormous property tax. I don't want this island at all.
Arif is taking out a very anti-island stance.
And then here's another thing that someone else brought up when I was tweeting through it, which was, what about global warming? As soon as you get that island, it's depreciating in value.
It's literally shrinking. Shrinking.
Yeah, in fact, Adidas could have scoped out an island already. It's worth $1 million now. Someone wins it, it'll be worth $180,000 instead. Also, how big is an island that's $1 million? It's probably not that big.
Dude, I think $1 million island sucks. Like, right. In order for it to be like a pleasant, like tropical island, you've probably got to have like land value worth the international equivalent of like $50 million or something.
I agree. You're getting a sandbar.
$1 million island. If the cash value of the island is $1 million, I don't want it either. That's not enough island for me.
Anyway, I would totally do it if Teddy got healthy.
Wow.
That's the question.
With no guarantee of future health? Just he immediately starts day one as though his knee was never exploded.
His knee is like fine. He plays at the level that he was going to play at, for the season if he had been healthy, 100%. Okay, so here's another problem with the island, but it's one I would bite the bullet for with Teddy, which is I don't know how to manage an island, right? I have no idea. I've played Tropico, but that's different.
I'm pretty good at SimCity.
Yeah, that's still different. I think
that's different. Yeah.
But someone's going to offer to manage this island for you, and 99% of those motherfuckers are untrustworthy, and I don't even know how to separate those guys out. But I would have someone manage and then sell my island. I'd be I have to go through the hassle of having an island, but Teddy's healthy. Now we can sell an island. Now I'm probably up $500,000 after taxes and paying the person to sell the island to some sad investor.
Just sell it to Larry Ellison. You can always convince that guy to buy another island.
Right? There you go.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure $1 million is way too low for a decent island, but I would consider it if it was equatorial and there was lots of exportable goods, like tropical fruits and maybe a rare monkey or something that I could.
There's nowhere near enough exportable goods to export on $1 million. That's an island the size of a $1 million island.
Well, I'm not saying try to corner the lime market or anything, but just be able to send everyone I know back home a box of.
Who are you going to sell 80 limes to?
I'm not going to sell them to anyone. The point is that it's a nice perk for my family and friends. They get a box of calamansi from my private island.
Cool. You're going to pay so much money to fly it out of that island. Here's a gift. It cost me $1,000 to get it to you.
I'll just sell a couple of the monkeys.
That's probably illegal.
Probably. Hopefully that falls under below the threshold of the worst thing I can do that would get me fired, because that would probably be the worst player on any team that I was on.
Yeah, exotic pets is probably somewhere in that spectrum, isn't it?
Dude, what are there? 3 NFL teams in Florida? There is no way exotic pets get you cut from a team or embarrass the league enough.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I'm just saying it's on the speeding ticket exotic pet sort of. That's on the spec. It probably doesn't get you cut. Also, if you're the worst player on the team, you're probably not getting paid very much. Should you really get that exotic pet, man? Some of them. Well, see, that's the problem with exotic pets is that sometimes they're initially very cheap. But then they just keep getting bigger, and you can't just release them into the swamp. What if the snake comes back? No way the snake comes back. Sometimes they do if they can't find enough food. All right. Zen Cupid writes in the battle of the kneeless running backs, who will get paid more, Peterson or Charles? We almost touched on this question, so we might as well I know, I danced around it. Gap of the conversation. Yeah, probably Charles, right? I would think so. He's more versatile. He can do more stuff. He's more injury prone, I guess. Peterson is more suspension prone, so Well, yeah, Peterson. I think they're both super injury prone. Peterson heals faster, but he tends to injure himself in such a way that it's like an 8-month time frame instead of a 12-month. It's not. It's not 3 weeks shortened down to 4 days. It's a good way to put it. No. It's not that 2 weeks turns into 1 week. It's that 12 months turns into 8. Exactly. It's that a career-ending injury merely ends his season. No, I think that Charles is better suited to what the modern NFL is looking for, and also has had a more recent, better history of past performance. Okay, so the interesting thing about Charles, and I almost mentioned it sort of the last time I was on air, I think actually at that Albert Lee radio station, was that I think 20 years from now, people are going to have an argument about who is better, Jamal Charles or Adrian Peterson, and they're going to be really impassioned supporters of Jamal Charles, because statistically, it's actually really easy to make the case as a more versatile running back, as a guy who has only ever averaged, I think, like 5 yards a carry over the past couple of years. Like, period. Like, Adrian Peterson has been, like, more volatile in his yards per carry average, something like that. I guess technically last year he averaged 4.975, so that's technically below 5. But, yeah, he's a pass-catching running back. You know, he doesn't get 2,000 yards, but he certainly gets, like, 1,400 yards pretty consistently. He's more efficient. And so people make the argument like 20 years from now that Jamal Charles was clearly the superior back. Or right now, because we went through this transition where we turned from the bell cow back to the versatile back, that, you know, our understanding is that Adrian Peterson certainly was the best running back for a period of time. And that transition from Peterson to someone else, LaShawn McCoy, Jamal Charles, not Marshawn Lynch, never Marshawn Lynch, Le'Veon Bell, you know, that transition is like weird and rough, but like there was never really a time, maybe 1 year, maybe, and I don't think so, but there's never a time that Jamal Charles was a better running back than Adrian Peterson, but 20 years from now, people are going to make that argument. I find that kind of fascinating. But for the same reasons they'll make that argument, I think Jamal Charles will have a better market.
All right. Alex Goebel writes in, would you rather trade into the first to select Kareem Hunt or pay Adrian $3 million over 2 years?
Been bashing Adrian a lot. I love Kareem Hunt a lot. There's no way I'm spending a first-round pick on Kareem Hunt. Adrian Peterson, $3 million over 2 years. That's a reasonable deal.
That's actually a pretty good deal. That he made it. This is the first appealing Adrian Peterson deal that I've seen.
Right. The hypothetical one in the question.
Yes.
And the thing is, I think Kareem Hunt might even be a bottom of the first-round quality running. He's probably not. But, like, there's a possibility that he could be, and so he might be worth that pick for somebody. But, I mean, $3 million over 2 years? Yeah, easily. There's other running backs in the draft.
Outlaw Doug, with 2 thunderstorm emoji, writes in, what is your favorite toothpaste?
I don't really think about this that much. Aquafresh? It's distinctive.
Do you always get the same toothpaste? Do you like? Have you been committed?
I get the closest toothpaste.
To what?
Like I'm at Target, wherever I happen to be when I find the toothpaste.
You just stop and you look at the toothpaste. You're like, this will do.
Yes. Well, I don't get like Tom's of Maine.
Good. Stuff is garbage.
Right. Like there is like a heuristic there, but it's very simple. It's like, don't get expensive ones, don't get flavorless ones. Get a brand that, you know, you don't have any strong feelings about. Like, if you don't know anything about the brand, don't get it. Now you're good.
I think one with fluoride is probably the technically correct answer.
One with fluoride.
I gotta tell you though, every now and then, and I don't think I've ever like admitted this in public, but every now and then I'll switch up my toothpaste routine and get a tube of that like blue Crest for Kids with sparkles that taste like bubblegum.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Only look, it's not like a daily driver necessarily, but I like a tube of it every now and then just for nostalgia purposes.
Just to remind myself I still have feelings.
Or that I used to have them when I was young and hopeful before I became a Vikings fan.
This is what joy and hope felt like.
Exactly, before the kick. Caleb Arndt writes in, what is the most redundant spice pairing?
So, I was thinking about this, and it's probably... Because this question, like, got me, because I was like, I should be able to answer this easily, and I don't know. It's probably, like, cloves and allspice, or cloves and anise, I think.
I would say, cloves and allspice, or licorice and anise.
Is licorice a spice? I thought anise went into licorice.
Well, maybe licorice and star anise, which is a different...
You're right. Yeah.
But also tastes like licorice, yeah. My first thought was cayenne pepper and chipotle powder.
Oh, yeah, I guess, yeah. I feel like the powdered versions of a lot of spices take away the interesting thing about those spices a lot. That's not like a a controversial opinion, but like it does remove the differences between a cayenne pepper and a chipotle pepper. Because chipotle in adobo is amazing.
Oh, it's the adobo sauce is a minor culinary miracle.
Right, just fantastic.
I have a better answer. Anytime you use a spice blend like a poultry seasoning, where you add more of any of the seasonings that compose it, like poultry seasoning with added sage.
Right.
I think that is by
That's
definition
a cop-out. That's obviously
the most like redundant
cinnamon
spice
and
pairing.
Chinese five spice. Like,
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly. What is the most contradictory spice pairing?
I was having a lot of trouble with this because I think there's a lot of situations where different bases, like in a soup versus like on pork, like spice pairings that you wouldn't necessarily think don't go together might end up going together. But star anise and anything.
Anything that you do not want to taste like licorice.
Yeah. Well, hold on. Let me ask Chelsea real, because we had this conversation, so I don't remember. What did we think was the most contradictory spice pairing?
Something that added too much sweetness and something that added too much spiciness, so that you would end up with a neutral flavor.
Yeah, so we ended up not coming up with the actual answer. We were just like, well, the qualities might include too much sweetness and too much spiciness, and we have to be careful about that, right? Because like you can add sweet and spicy onto pork, and it tastes really good. You can have Mexican hot chocolate, and it tastes really good. But there's a lot of situations where like, you know, a cinnamon sugar and like curry just are not gonna. Yeah,
I've got one for you. Green Szechuan peppercorn and yellow curry.
Really? I've never tried it. It sounds like you've tried that.
I have not. And just thinking about it in my mind does not sound pleasant. Because, like, you know, I mean, yellow curry, right? It's delicious. It's like a little bit spicy, a little bit sweet, kind of like an all-season, like, warming type dish. Right. Green Szechuan peppercorn, very, like, floral, peppery, but has that very particular, like, Szechuan, like, numbing quality to it.
Right. Well, the numbing is like its signature. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that would just overwhelm all of the kind of delicate flavors.
Like the warmness. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the delicate spicy like warmness of the curry would just be like overtaken by the weird numbing qualities and the kind of brassy floral nature of the green peppercorn. If anyone feels bold enough to try it, report back.
I think if overwhelming flavors is a decent metric, then pink peppercorns and saffron.
Really?
Yeah.
Like in terms of it being just like a giant waste of perfectly good saffron?
Yeah, exactly. Like the saffron, I mean, and you know, it doesn't have like a subtle or weak flavor, but it definitely has a flavor that can be overwhelmed. I think pink peppercorns, which I guess are not actually peppercorns, pink peppercorns can very easily overwhelm a dish. Easily.
All right. Purple PTSD writes in, how many weird headline-worthy Adrian Peterson tweets will we have during his time as a non-Viking?
This is such a great question. The over-under he set was 7.5, right?
Yeah, that I think it all depends on what you define as his time as a non-Viking. Like, does he get signed to a team and then cut before the season starts? In that case, I think 7.5 is a reasonable over-under. Does he survive an entire season? If so, then I think we should set the over-under at least 20.
I mean, he doesn't tweet that much. It's just an event when he does. Do you think he's going to do like the Greg Jennings thing where he like keeps on tweeting like annoying, obnoxious bullshit? Like, oh, who knows who's going to sign me? Like that sort of thing?
Actually, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he went full Greg Jennings and just had like a second career as kind of like me, like a football gadfly that nobody wants to listen to.
I would definitely want to see Adrian Peterson in the booth once.
I think you might see him in the booth once, but I suspect he will try to create like a cottage industry around himself, and no one will really be that enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, right. Well, it's a good description of Greg Jennings. But like, At least Jennings has like the fundamental talent to do it.
Jennings is an extremely charismatic person. He can get away with that sort of thing. I don't know.
Right.
We'll end up with I think Adrian Peterson has a lot of people around him who will tell him that he is very charismatic.
Yes.
So, but no, during his time as a well, I guess this all counts as time as a non-Viking.
I mean, are we? He just declined the option, so he hasn't been cut yet. He's still under contract. Right, he's just going to be a free agent.
Well, no, but time as a non-Viking could be interpreted to mean like the remaining time of his life, or perhaps even like the heat death of the universe.
I think the setting the thing at 7.5 kind of implies between now and his retirement from football, which presumably is 1 year, right? Like there's no way he gets up to 8 in the off season between when his contract is up and he signs another cut, because it's like like a week.
So we're basically looking at like 1 calendar year, like until the end of next season, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to set it at over.
I'll take the over. If I was setting the over under, I would set it at like 9.5 or 10.5. But if it's 7.5, I'll take the over.
All right.
Griffin Michael writes in, Okung at $9 million a year or Khalil at $6 million a year. With Vikings cap room, it seems like price shouldn't hold them back.
Okung at 9 or Khalil at 6?
Yes.
I don't know if I'd take Okung at 9. Guess I'm not against it.
I would take Okung at 9. 7 or 8, cheerfully. 9, I mean...
Well, if the alternative is Matt Khalil at actually a fairly reasonable 6... I just want to be done with it. I'm going to take Okung at 9 just for the value of being done with it.
Just so we can say we have a different, possibly better player.
Yeah, right. Tackle. Just like, I'll pay $3 million for the illusion of hope. Yeah, easily.
It's the audacity of hope, Arif. The audacity. Matt Nelson writes in with, I guess, what is sort of a 2-part question. How long before the Adrian Peterson, they're going to regret this move stories start? I assume about whichever team picks him up.
Yeah, day 1, man.
Yeah, minutes. Literal minutes.
Yeah.
As in less than 60.
He's going to throw unintentional, random, backhanded compliments / shade, too.
It's going to be a shady day when the Giants finally sign him.
It's gonna be great. Everyone else is gonna embrace the Adrian Peterson just says shit maxim.
Oh, we were here first. We're always here first. We tried to tell everybody Christian Ponder sucked. No one would listen. Second part. How long after signing with the new team will Peterson start bashing the organization?
Well, it depends on whether or not we interpret it as intentional. That's the thing.
I would say give him till week 3. Give him like he'll do fine in the preseason and then have an underwhelming performance either week 1 or week 2, and then
Classic.
Either Nelson Peterson or Adrian himself will crawl out of the woodwork to decry what that team is doing to that poor man.
Perfect.
This is my estimate.
Is that it?
That is it. Well, yeah. We're gonna stick with the PG-13 questions this time. So I think we successfully teased your new adventure in the lead-in to the show. Do you have anything coming up? Well, you mentioned a bit of football writing that you're working on. Do you have anything that you would like to plug as we are exiting the show?
Yeah, I want to keep on mentioning the production profiles I've been doing. I've been taking a look at what college statistics help us best predict player performance in the NFL. And, what I've found, and a lot of that has to do more with research than it does with actually like testing. But so a lot of this is stuff that it's already established as like something that that can be incorporated into analytics. So I'm not breaking a lot of new ground with a lot of these things. But what I've found is that, we tend to underrate certain aspects of production for a lot of things. And B, that, those statistics are there that'll help us project performance at the next level. And so I think that a lot of the, maybe box score scouting is bad in the sense that simple box scores don't tell us enough. but production-oriented analytics can be good, and I'm doing it for every position. So I just finished safeties, and so I think I've done every defensive position. I did defensive tackles, I did edge defenders, linebackers, cornerbacks, and safeties. And so now, and I've already done offensive linemen. So now I've got running backs, tight ends, wide receivers, and quarterbacks. Quarterbacks will be particularly hard to do, but I think I found kind of a nugget for that. Anyway, it's going to be, it's fun, and I like what I found. So just head over to coldomaha.com or zonecoverage.com. They'll take you to the same website, and you'll see my production profiles for safeties and all the positions I just mentioned. There's some pretty decent anecdotal evidence that some of the stuff that I've had to break a little bit of new ground in, which is offensive line statistics and coverage statistics for cornerbacks and safeties, is weekly predictive. And we only have a year's worth of data, given that CFB Film Room and College Football Focus have been releasing stats for literally about 1 year before this last season. And so the rookies that performed well in those statistics have done well as rookies in their first year in the NFL. So we've got a small data set that implies that this work is pretty valuable for the stuff that we don't have that much information for. And the stuff that we do, like linebackers and wide receivers, it'll be fun to see, whose production matters and in what way.
That's what's up. And we will return next week with another episode of Norse Code. I imagine. Haven't really talked about. Well, wait. We can do Combine breakdown, right?
Yeah, hopefully. Right? Like I think because I think people have arrived at the Combine, so there's going to be a lot of workouts that'll have been done by then.
Excellent. And yeah, maybe we'll hold off until the end of the. I keep wanting to call them feats of strength, but they're not all strength.
It's still like a good. Yeah, I like it. Feats of strength.
We'll defer to the end of the feats of athleticism so that we can give you a proper recap of them upon their completion. And until then, you know where to find Arif, and I'll be here waiting. But one more minor programming note: we will be looking for somebody to potentially take over like interim hosting duties, someone else to join the team later this off season. So if you have any background in talking to a microphone or editing your own audio or whatever, then send us like a little audition tape, norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. And
don't hype it too much. Oh, you sound way too excited.
just saying, and it's not super urgent, but just throwing it out there that it would be nice to have another head on the staff, since Arif is slowly taking over the podcast world, and James and I are occupied by full-time jobs that are not being the Minnesota Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human, as you have kind of cornered that title for yourself. Also, accepting submissions for Norse Code Formula for Season 5, because Harambe is old and busted. And,
definitely looking forward to your suggestions for Season 5.
So yeah, send those to us at all the places indicated in the outgoing stinger. And until next week, spoons out. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, or wherever else fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, who can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. Our intrepid producer and occasional co-host James Pagachnik can be found on Twitter at Big Mono, or curating the official Norse Code Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. I'm your host with a firm grasp of the obvious, Dusty O'Connell, and my name is my handle on Twitter. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, your one-time donation can be made at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Please visit our website, norsecodepodcast.com, where you'll find links to our Facebook and YouTube pages, along with the episode archive and some other good stuff. And any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be emailed to norsecodepodcast.com. On behalf of James and Arif, my name is Dusty, and we all thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.